Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Thinking and Acting Like an Entrepreneur, our first session and also our live session. I'm very happy to have you with me, and I'll be very happy to have you with me also in the course. But let me give an introduction about the course, about myself and everything. So first of all, entrepreneurship was actually to be an entrepreneur was one of the best things which happened to me in my life. I had the privilege to start several businesses, and right now I'm a professor at Aachen University, and combining my practical and theoretical experience is also what I'd like to do in the course, and I'm very much looking forward to this course. So why do we do this course? Maybe I can give you some introductory remarks first, about like 15-20 minutes, and then we can skip to questions. We already received a couple of questions, and if you do have more questions, just shoot us a note, and I'm happy to answer those. So first of all, why are we offering this course? Well, if you look at the Standard & Poor's index from 86 to 16, actually Standard & Poor's was developed in the 50s, which is the biggest 500 companies in the US. Guess how many of these companies, I'm losing the ear right now, guess how many of these companies are still present in the index that were present in 1957? Actually, I don't know the exact number by today, but it's less than 20%. So every year, what you see is every year companies from the biggest 500 are not biggest 500, and new companies get into this index. Which means if you have founded a company roughly 60 years ago, you might not have survived. And this is bad news for big companies who were in the index by these days, and it's probably good news for entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs have taken over. And if you look at other numbers, 10 years ago, if you look at the biggest valuations of companies in the world, you're able to find oil companies. So processing oil was very, very good to make a lot of money and get a high valuation for your company. Nowadays, it's processing data, processing anything else. You find different companies, actually companies we consider entrepreneurial companies like an Amazon, like a Google, as the top highest valued companies worldwide. And this is the phenomenon we are dealing with right now. And this is also what the course is about. The course is about entrepreneurship, and actually everyone starts with entrepreneurial success stories. And they are all over the world, and they are very well known, as you can see from the Time magazine, which is published widely, and you see the faces of very famous entrepreneurs on this slide. And what we also do is we look into those success stories. But what we actually would like to do is analyze the success stories, analyze what founders do in order to really understand what is making an entrepreneur successful. First of all, we know and we have to know that if you see those people on the slide, there are many, many others which are not on the slide who failed. And the question is, why did the ones fail and the others be successful? And the entrepreneurship research is looking into that question for some time, and what they actually try to find out, whether it's about the genes, for example, or whether it's about something else. And now we know, and we would say it's about entrepreneurial behavior. Actually, it is about entrepreneurial thinking and acting. So there is something, Peter Drucker said that in 1985, long ago, that you can teach entrepreneurship, and I do believe you can really teach entrepreneurship by looking at Michael Dell and thinking about how he developed his company. Actually, with only $1,000 or a couple $1,000 as a starting point, he developed a company being known worldwide nowadays. And he was at the university, he was a student at that time in a totally different field, started his company with very, very little means. And this is what entrepreneurs can do, and they can do it successfully if they follow the path to success we'd like to describe in our course, which we describe by entrepreneurial thinking and acting. And there are many, many examples for that, and sorry for this one. And one more example is Starbucks coffee, for example. And Starbucks coffee was developed actually, I would say, also by chance. Afterwards, with a very, very good execution concept, but initially by chance. Since the Starbucks founder, he had a coffee shop in Seattle, and he was traveling to Italy and seeing that you can drink a coffee in Italy and still stay seated after you had the coffee. And he thought, well, that's an interesting concept. Why are people not being chased away from those coffee tables and they can still sit there? I mean, if you chase them away, you can make more money per table, per evening or per day. If you can sell another and another coffee, if the people have finished the coffee and still stay seated, that's not possible. So he saw that and thought, well, I can make it a concept also for my coffee shop in the US, and maybe that's an interesting concept for everyone. So why don't we give it a try? And this is actually how many entrepreneurs start. They see something in their daily lives and they give it a try. And this is an earpiece that doesn't really work out for me. So they gave it a try. So he came back to Seattle and said of the new concept, and the coffee has to be more expensive, and that it pays out for me. And he tried that, and people appreciated that, and then he brought it all over the world. Honestly, except Italy. Italy is not a country for Starbucks, since they have all these great coffee shops. And the question is, was it all by chance? Or what were the elements which we can teach? And this is what the course is about. We're looking at the elements which are theoretically founded, and we'd like to teach these elements. And one element is also that we are always dealing with an uncertain situation. The Starbucks founder, when he came back to the US, he didn't know whether the people like the new concept or not. He had to give it a try. When Michael Dell started to assemble computers and sold it to other people, people told him, there's a large competition out there, you'll never be successful in this market. He said, why not give it a try? And that's one of these elements. If you deal with uncertainty, you have to find other ways to reduce uncertainty, to fight yourself into the market. And one example is Starbucks, and another example is Nespresso. And this is also interesting, since Nespresso is a totally different story on the same market. And the different story is that this is a story from an established company. And they looked at the coffee market, and they saw the coffee market is not really doing well. It wasn't doing well in Europe many, many years ago. So you weren't able to really make money with coffee, except those fancy things like cappuccino and so on, that only basically existed in Italy, but in many other countries like Germany, where I come from, we had this filter coffee and nothing else. So Nespresso thought, why don't we find different ways to prepare coffee and change the entire market? And they did a lot of research in that. Actually, they did a lot of research in developing the machine, which is not too easy, since you have to hold pressure for the coffee that it really tastes well and all sorts of things. But they succeeded in putting that on the market with a great mixture of the 4 Ps in marketing, and basically not being alone, and that's very important, reinventing the coffee market. And this is also an element. If you are an entrepreneur, you're dealing with uncertainty, you don't know whether the market would like to accept is accepting what you bring to the market. that it is good if you have others, even if they are competitors, that work on the same problem from a different angle of the market. We say this is co-opetition, so this is competition but also cooperation at the same time, not explicit but implicitly in the market. And this is also something which is very typical for entrepreneurial stories. In those entrepreneurial stories, timing is important. Sometimes entrepreneurs are too early and they're not able to hold through, so they don't have the means or something else, and they can't cope with being too early. Sometimes entrepreneurs are too late. Sometimes followers are the successful ones. Think about Facebook, for example, compared to MySpace. Much more successful. Sometimes the first movers are the successful ones nowadays. So we do look at these stories and always try to understand what we can teach in an entrepreneurship course and combine it with my personal experience, which I had. And other stories you can see over here is the story of Apple and Steve Jobs. For sure, he was a very visionary personality. We like to look what is the role of a vision compared to just be in control. And I would say there are visionary people in the world. However, if you really look at all the entrepreneurs around, actually only a few are really as visionary as Steve Jobs, and all the others have a great execution. So the thing we are going to teach, or we'd like to teach, is the great execution. And Steve Jobs was also an example for great execution. And the story I'm referring to here, and this is also an element which I think is interesting, since we also talked about Nespresso, is why wasn't it a Sony to develop the iPod or the device in the same way? So it was Steve Jobs who was the first to do that, and not a Sony, but Sony. They had the technologies, I'm very sure about that. They had a music group, they had everything in place, but it was Steve Jobs who reinvented the market. And this is also an interesting story, since we can see not only what it means, as I said before, to deal with the uncertain situation, so you don't know what's happening, and nobody knew whether this will be successful or not, but also which role entrepreneurs play in that. And they are not the average Joes, they are different. They are actually making the difference. And we call it owner-manager dominance, and I'd like to talk about that too, saying, okay, we have a dominant person, and this dominant person is not only managing the company, is also owning the company, and by that having more power. What does it mean for situations? And if you look at entrepreneurs and what they did, they were not the average Joes, and they are not the average Joes. And Elon Musk, he's driven differently, and he, in the financial crisis, when Tesla had to make a financing round and nobody knew whether electromobility will be the future or not. Nowadays, people are talking totally different about this topic, but by then, nobody really was sure. Are people accepting lower ranges, charging times, and all sorts of things? Nobody wanted to give him money, just a few, and so he invested his own money, a lot of his own money. Sony did by this time, saying, okay, we invest money into a device like an iPod. And Elon Musk did it, Sony didn't. So this has also to do with the owner-manager dominance, and this is a big topic in entrepreneurship, in understanding entrepreneurial behavior a little more. So in total, what we do is, and these are the main topics, and these are the topics we go through in our slides in our next weeks, are about the situations entrepreneurs find themselves in, dealing with the uncertainty, and how to act in this situation as an owner-manager, how you make a difference. And there are theories to that, which is the entrepreneurial thinking and acting. We call that effectuation. And they are also ways to overcome the uncertainty in different ways. This is what we actually are talking about. And for sure, we are talking about successful entrepreneurs, like a Steve Jobs. And everyone knows that on each successful entrepreneur, you probably find 10 not successful people. We'd like to change the ratio if we teach a course like this, so make you more successful. Even if you see, I can't be successful with my first idea, stop it earlier and start something even bigger. So this is also an outcome of the course, ideally. But why do entrepreneurs take that kind of risk being not successful, although they really worked hard? Actually, it is because those types of businesses, and this is what we are focusing on to some extent. We are focusing, this is a study about innovation and on new business. And we were looking at, the author of the study was looking at the types of innovation and saying, okay, on average in his study, 14% of the innovation was radical, which led to disruptions, total changes of market and so on. And 86% incremental innovation. And to be honest, in Germany, I just heard yesterday, we are very good in incremental innovations. We're not that good in radical innovations. Other countries are a lot better. Why is it worth talking about radical innovation if you have 10 unsuccessful and one successful one? Well, because you can make the money with the radical innovation. You see, the income is, these 14% count for 38% of the income, and 61% of the profits in the respective study. And you were able to see that if you were looking at Nestlé, which is the mother company of the Nespresso part, where actually the profits from Nestlé came from when Nespresso was really successful. It, to a large extent, came out of Nespresso, and this is just only a small part of the entire Nestlé business, which is a real big company. So this is what we are dealing with in entrepreneurship, and our course is about those 6 topics. What we like to do is, first of all, unfold your entrepreneurial personality. We'd like to show you that everyone can be an entrepreneur. I'm sure everyone can be an entrepreneur. Everyone has some experience in the past that lead to the fact that you can be positive about being on your own and starting your own business. So this is about unfolding your entrepreneurial personality. If you have unfolded your personality, the next question is always, where do ideas come from? So I believe that ideas are always around. So if you just look at your life, and actually this doesn't fit for me really, so you saw it, I was playing around with that, and so you can probably make that better. That's an idea. Maybe it's not really radical. That's a German thing, actually. That's incremental innovation. But there might be something else which is more radical around you. And what you do is you just ask yourself, what are the problems you're facing and all sorts of things. And so if you have an idea, you have to differentiate ideas from potentially successful ideas, so from opportunities. It's very nice in English to say that we have an idea versus opportunity. In Germany, we have different words that don't sound so nice. And then you have to apply the process of successful entrepreneurs, which is basically the entrepreneurial thinking and acting. So how do you get started as an entrepreneur? If you really want to think and act like an entrepreneur, like a Michael Dell. No money, different field, but going to the path to success. What can you do? That's effectuation, we call it. That's the theory we use, and this is a very entrepreneurial, as a theory from entrepreneurship. And we like to focus on that theory and show you how this can help you to be more entrepreneurial. If you have a more radical idea in your mind, and if you execute that, there's always a question, do you do it by your own, or do you and need someone else working with you, and is this potentially a team member, or is it just a partner which as a regular stakeholder with a contract and so on. So the question is on your team, and this is important also in the first days, and if you want to step further, then you really get your company started in a lean way. And this is what we focus in this chapter about, is trying lean. As I said, Michael Dell with just $1,000 and or 5,000. I'm not sure about the amount, but between 1 and 5,000, and get started and be successful with very little means. And same for Airbnb, same for Facebook, same for many of these companies. They started with little means, but then they scaled up. And this is about the process of successful entrepreneurs, effectuation, and being lean actually can help you to be effectual. So these two concepts also, they come from totally different angles. They have a lot in common for entrepreneurs in practice in order to be successful. Now, last but not least, I love those chapters. We have one chapter, watch out for critical obstacles of new ventures. So what are the watch outs for you yourself if you would like to start as an entrepreneur? This is also something, which are the mistakes you shouldn't do. There's an overview of the course, so you will learn how entrepreneurs think, what you need to do to think and act like an entrepreneur, how you create your business ideas, how you get started, also with the right team, which are the pitfalls, and what is really important, so in summary, in the early phase of being an entrepreneur. And this is what the course is about, and I was going through all of this in my personal life with my companies, and honestly I did a couple of mistakes, and didn't start with the right team, and didn't really know how to really be effectual, spent too much money on things, and I never got something back, which is an art, for example. If you are effectual as an entrepreneur, you always invest money instead of spending. It's a big difference. Investing means there is something coming back to you into your pocket. Ideally, it's money. That's the financial investment. But if it's not the money, it's a learning issue. But we sometimes spent money. We didn't get money back, and we didn't learn anything, and that's a mistake you shouldn't make. And you won't make if you follow the course, and this is one of the things I really like to teach you in this course. So this is what the course is about. Yes, well, we received a couple questions, so why don't we talk about your questions, which you had also before, and maybe there are more questions coming in. I'm looking to this side because the guys are sitting over there and taking the questions, and ideally they can tell me about those questions. So maybe I can start with my first question. How much time do we have, actually? I'm a little out of time. If you see, I love to talk about entrepreneurship. I'm always talking too much, and you see it here. So I had 20 minutes for those slides. I used 25, and now we have to make the questions a little faster, and then we're gonna take a couple questions from your side. So. The first question came from India, and the question is, if there are so many great tools to teach entrepreneurs how to be successful, why do so many startups still fail? That's a great question. And if you say, I can teach you everything, you don't need to fail, I'm not saying that. I'm still saying you're dealing with uncertainty. You're dealing with a situation where you don't know whether your technology might work, whether your market might accept what you're doing. Let's have an example. Autonomous driving. Autonomous driving is a nice thing. And technically it works out. So would you like to sit in a car which is driven autonomously? Well, we probably say yes, it's okay. We saw a couple accidents, but honestly, it's just a few accidents on the many miles autonomous driven cars are making. So it's probably safe enough to sit in a car which is autonomously driven. But think that through. Autonomous driving is a lot more complex technologically compared to autonomous flying. And most of the planes are flying autonomously most of the time, but they still have pilots. And actually, in most situations, they don't need pilots. Would you sit in a plane that is autonomously flown without a pilot? Well, I don't. And that's the thing. Technologically, it's easier. There are a few situations where it doesn't work. And because of those few situations, I'm afraid. You might say I'm German, and Germans are always afraid. Maybe, but I don't want to fall to the ground. And I know there's the situations. And actually, I don't know whether there's situations where you need the pilots, if you can still cope with that autonomously. But that's a typical example for entrepreneurs. You're in that situation of it works out technologically, the market is not going to accept it. Or is not accepting that what you're doing to a large extent, only to a small extent. And there are now helicopters, for example, which are flown autonomously. Would you sit in those? Maybe if it's only a few, maybe it's getting more difficult, and we will read in the news whether they fall down or not. So, but what I'm saying is, if you deal with the uncertainty, if you deal with behavior of people in the future, which they can't really predict, then you can always fail. And it's not your mistake. It's not about what we teach. It's not about what you do. You can work really hard. You can do all of the things really in the best way possible. But the market is crazy, irrational, whatever. They don't accept what you're doing. So this is why still so many startups fail. On the other hand, also many startups are not effectual, are not lean enough. And if others are lean and effectual, they are more successful. And what you can see in many markets, many startups start and only a few remain in the market. So that could be the different reason why many startups fail. So all those should listen to the course ideally. Well, second question from Germany, Thomas. What can established companies improve to foster entrepreneurial thinking amongst their employees? So that's a very interesting question from a different perspective. And if we talk about effectuation, you'll see that in the course. We also say this is a theory and this is also a heuristic which you can use, you should use in situations where you can't predict the future. Or where it's hard to predict the future, where you can't plan at the very end. If you look at large companies, they need to plan. They need to coordinate their business. So they have a hard time to be entrepreneurial because these are different ways of thinking and acting, the planning approach and the effectual approach. And if you have people in your company that are employed because they are good in the management mode of planning and so on, they might not be the most entrepreneurial type of guys. So this is a problem, and you can only try to hire different people, look at your employees, and maybe you find different people. And sometimes even those processes don't work out, because we talk about that as the liabilities which entrepreneurs have. Sometimes also large companies have liabilities. A large car manufacturer like a Mercedes, BMW has a brand name. If you want to try something out and what you try is against your brand, your recognition, you do have a hard time to do that. Entrepreneurs don't have brand recognition, so they can do everything. And you can see it with a Tesla or with even the German cars which come into the electronic cars which come in the market. They are not good as a BMW. I'm not talking about Tesla, the German ones. But you can give it a try as an entrepreneur. as a large company, having that brand in your background, you can't easily give it a try, and this is why established companies have a hard time doing that, and they should find other ways to cope with the situation of potentially being disrupted by radical innovations of entrepreneurs. There's actually also a MOOC we have in coping with disruptions, so you might want to look at the other edX course. The next question is from South Korea, and also an interesting question. It seems to be easier to start a venture in some countries than in others. Should I move, for example, to the US when thinking about starting my own business? Well, there's always a yes or no, or it depends in my answers. You can probably always start in your own country. And first of all, give it a try in your own country, because you need the learning from your own country in order to know when to internationalize. However, each country has a specific situation in terms of access to capital, access to employees, access to technologies or tech people, access to potential partners. And if you look at those 4 areas, you will see that if you are in a country where you do not have the best access to people or financial resources, you might want to develop your company in a different setting further. So one of my companies we just sold this year was a medtech company, and we started that medtech company here in Germany, but we knew that some of the most important partners or also potential buyers for this company actually are located in the US. And also for the bigger financing rounds, we probably at least need an US access. So what we did is we opened a subsidiary in the US and we worked in Houston, Texas, actually, with this company in the medical center in order to have the other possibilities. So what I'm saying is it might make sense to start local in order to learn about what you're doing. However, then it's always worth thinking about your country, the possibilities in your country, and when it makes sense to go global or to go to a different setting. So these were the 3 questions actually we had before. Now we're getting to more questions into the live chat, and we have a couple of questions. So I would like to start with the first question is this course has some practical example of how do things, or will it only be theoretical? Actually, as I said, I love this combination. I'm now at a university, and I'm a university professor, and I do my research in order to understand better what entrepreneurs do, but I always have my companies running, and it's a privilege for me, to be honest, to be in that situation. So what I just founded a company 4 weeks ago, the next company 4 weeks ago, and we are developing this company, and we're thinking about exactly those questions we are covering in the course, and this gives me a very good feeling for what is important for entrepreneurs and what is not. So I would like to share both. For sure, I'd like to come from a theoretical angle, to understand what is common in more than just my companies. So I'm looking at many entrepreneurs. This is my research perspective. However, I always understand it also as practical examples. I would like to give you practical examples from my experience and from all the other stories we have. So we always apply the theory to practice. The next one from Paul is success stories are good, but what is about survivorship bias? That's an important point. Actually, that's also a shortcoming we have as even entrepreneurship researchers. We look at the successful ones and we'll try to learn from the successes. We do not look too much to the survivorship bias. The only thing what we are doing to those who don't survive, so to say, And this is why we integrate this last chapter and say, okay, what are the biggest mistakes we saw from entrepreneurs, actually from my experience, also from entrepreneurs that failed. So this is a way to cope with that. However, we don't have big data on companies or entrepreneurs that didn't survive. So we can do more in that. However, this is why we have the sixth chapter, in order to also look at those who didn't survive. What did they do wrong? So what are the pitfalls you shouldn't walk into? The next is do we have to be sure that the market will accept the product that we have before introducing it? Honestly, you can't be sure. This is dealing with uncertainty. And actually, if you're sure, this is probably the wrong course. If you're not sure, if you're dealing with that uncertainty, if you want to learn how to overcome the uncertainty, how to give it a try, work yourself into those markets where you're not sure, this is the right course. And this is like we like to teach you. So no, you don't need to be sure. It's better that you are not sure, because then you do have an advantage if you are effective. The next question is there anyone see live video? It's only loading here but nothing shown. I can't actually comment this one because I don't know what technically what's happening. And Patrick, my guy is saying, okay, it works on our end, might be an issue with connectivity. Hope it worked out for you, Amr. I'm very much looking forward to having you in the course. Hope it's only a small technological problem, but I apologize for that, sure. So the next question. What is the primary focus of radical innovation? To solve an existing problem or create something new which isn't necessarily a problem? Great question. We have a slide on that. We have a lot of slides, but this is the pain or gain discussion. Do you, as an entrepreneur, go in from a pain perspective, which is solving a problem? I see problems and I want to solve it, and this is how I go into the market. Or do you create a market by showing the people what they might need else, which they haven't discovered yet? Actually, there's both. It's interesting that entrepreneurs sometimes came from the very niche of solving a problem, and then they worked into themselves into also playing the gain game. My comment on this, and we talk about that when we are in the chapter of idea generation. My comment on this is it's a lot easier to start if you solve a problem, because people are a lot closer to buy from you, because if they have a problem, they are willing to look at your solution and willing to pay. If you are on the other side of creating a gain, you might be really successful, like with Pokemon Go. I mean, who needs Pokemon Go, honestly? And I didn't play that, so I'm probably the least person who should talk about that. But they created a game, and that's cool, and they made a lot of money. But who's really successful in doing that? That's harder to do. If you're lucky, it goes viral and it works out fine. If you're not, actually, that's it. So, as I said before, Steve Jobs was able to create a gain. He was able to create something new, which wasn't necessarily a problem of people. You can always try to analyze whether it still was a problem. But he was really visionary. He was good in that. In most cases, most of the entrepreneurs I've seen, actually, they work on problems, and they're quite successful in doing that. And that's the better way to step into that. However, maybe you can change it one day, and you start small with the pain, and like Facebook started with the pain of not having this literally Facebook print paper version online, and they created a gain of people wanting to share everything they did in life. So you see entrepreneurs work on both, but it's easier to start with the pain. Probably running out of time if I look at that. There's lots of more questions. Thanks for shooting them out. So what is the next one? Given the fact that starting a new venture has associated risks, should we take a conservative or an aggressive approach at the beginning of an adventure? Wow, interesting question. Actually, we did research on that and looking at the approach of founders into markets. And what we were able to see is start conservative, get more aggressive is the best way to do that. So what I do, it's a quick answer. You can do a lot more on that. But the quick answer is, first of all, you need to learn. You have to find yourself into that market. If you're too aggressive in that, others will react too soon and they won't let you in. If you're not aggressive, it's good for you because you can learn and take your time for learning. But whenever you know what's happening, then you can execute more aggressively because you know what's happening. You can use more money, you can spend the best way, and all sorts of things. Quick answer, there's a lot more to that. Actually, not in this course, in a different course, but I see you have a very interesting question, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in the course. And if you should have more questions, we should do another live session. Just let me know. I'm very much looking forward to actually work with you, just via those means we have, but maybe you're gonna be a successful entrepreneur in the future, and now one day the picture is on my screen. I would love that. So I welcome you to the course. I'm very much looking forward to that. Thanks for listening right now.